Whoops! Now, we didn't even have to start the move, and Aurora is an hour away from Longmont, which is where my parents' house lives. So it was an hour-long drive of awkward, and then also 3 hours of unloading of awkward. And it was the craziest thing because I was like, uh-oh. It's like, yeah, I don't know if I said the right thing. This is what I want. I don't know if it's what she wants. 2 days later, my mom says, we need to talk. And I said, okay. And she said, I'm sorry. And I said, what? She's like, I'm sorry. She's like, you know, you're my last baby boy. You're my baby boy. It's the last one that it's like my older brother Gary is 10 years older than me, so I was the last one out of the house. And she said, I'm sorry. She's like, you know, I care about you. I want to know where you are and things like that. And I told my mom, I said, Mom, you are one of the most important people in my life. I am going to share with you the good times when I'm going out on trips, when I'm speaking, when I'm doing those things, when I'm doing the big things. You'll know. You're not going to call me and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I'm in Mongolia, what's up? And she'd be like, excuse me? I told my mom, I was like, don't worry about those. I mean, like, Mom, I want to share my joys with you. You'll know when those are. I'm not going to call you because I'm miserable driving home at 9 o'clock at night. You don't need to know that. And so then she's like, you're right. She's like, you're right. And that's what we do now. That's our understanding, is when good things are coming along, that's what we do. So I let her know, and life's great. So with communicating, this is what's really important, is that give your child, your son or daughter, trust based on their maturity. You know their maturity. You can tell their maturity by the way that they talk to you, by the way that they communicate with you, boundaries, how they express their emotions. All of this has to do with how you were listening. If you listen to them, you're going to know how mature they are. Don't shut down or get angry. I have way too many students coming up to me who are very angry that their parents get mad at them. Even if they did something wrong. Even if they did something wrong. My students come up and they're just like, when my parents are angry, it sucks. And that's what I hear from your kids. Is that they're just like, they just shut down, they don't care. Or they get really angry and I can't have a conversation with them. And that's why it's so crazy. Draw attention to inappropriate actions. It's okay. To be like, just like when we said, this is not an appropriate way to talk to me. If you keep this up, I'm going to take away privileges. Point that out, because they need to know what inappropriate behavior looks like. If you're not going to tell them, if you're just going to be like, just get out of my face, they're not going to learn. Draw attention to it and say, this isn't appropriate. This isn't appropriate. Teach, model, and expect. If we want to be able to teach our sons and daughters how to communicate about their feelings, about their emotions, about their day, about how they feel about whatever's going on in their life, we need to do the same thing. We absolutely need to do the same thing. And I'll show you why that's important when we get to a little bit later on. Focus on your actions, not just your words. This is something that was brought up in the book as well. What your child does is much more important than what he says. Which is weird. Because when your child says to you, oh, you know, like, I don't think smoking weed is necessarily a bad thing. But they're not smoking weed, but they're like, but I'm never going to do it. They don't punish them for thinking that smoking weed isn't a bad thing. Because they're like, but I'm never going to smoke it. Focus on what your child does, not necessarily what they say. So, next one. This is a huge one. This is a huge one. Okay, this is something that I've heard from my students, which is interesting, which is weird and interesting for me as a presenter, is that they're sick and tired of their parents fighting. They are absolutely sick and tired of their parents fighting with each other in front of them. The way that you interact with your husband or wife can impact how your child interacts with you. I have been in a household where the father is disrespectful to the mother, and therefore the son is disrespectful to the mother. And guess what? There is no win situation there, because then the dad gets mad at the son doesn't know what to do because he was doing what his dad does, his mom gets mad, everyone gets mad. Everyone gets angry. The way that you interact with your spouse can have an impact on the way that your child communicates with you. One thing that my parents always did is that they argued in front of my brother and I, but only when it was appropriate in small things, you know, not the big old, like, finances. Not like, what the heck did you spend $100 on? You know, they didn't have those conversations in front of, I can see some people have had that conversation before. They didn't have those conversations in front of us. But they did have disagreements in front of us to show us how a proper disagreement should happen. But I have way too many kids coming up to me saying, I'm sick and tired of my parents fighting. I'm tired of it. And that's something that we need to be aware of. if you are disrespectful, expect disrespect. I've seen it happen. It's not something that I read or something. It's something that I've actually seen. That when we are disrespectful to them, they're going to be disrespectful right back to us. And I think why we do that is because if we try to be respectful, they're still disrespectful. Because then we get frustrated. Then we're like, fine, I'm going to get in your face and we're going to have this conversation. We can't do that. We can't do that. We need to show respect and we need to model respect. And we need to tell them, you're being very disrespectful right now. If you need some time to think about what's going on, please, let's take a 5-minute break. Because we are not going to be disrespectful to each other right in front of each other's face. We can't have that. Do not threaten your child. This is a big one. This is a huge one. Do not threaten your child. Do not say those things like, if you are not back home by 11, there are going to be some horrible consequences. Because then the kid's scared. You don't want to scare your children. You want to share with them the reasons why you are setting those boundaries. It's because I'm genuinely worried about you, and I just want to make sure that you are home at an appropriate time, and this is my household, and that's my car you're driving, so get the car back. But don't threaten them, because that's what I also hear from my students. And guess what? You're not their professional counselor, so you don't have to give advice all the time. Give advice. They're going to be someone that you want to go to. But you don't have to give advice all the time. Sometimes they just want someone to hear them. Sometimes they just want you to listen. Let me tell you something. I have a very tough time communicating with my father. When I was younger, I had a very tough time communicating with him because every single time I came to him to try to talk to him, he would want to give advice. And I'm like, Dad, shut up. All I want you to do right now is just listen. Let's just talk. Let's just talk. I don't want you to give me advice. I just shut up. Just like let me talk. And so that's why we need to remember this as well. When it is and is not our time to be a counselor. All right, last slide for this. Your voice control is going to be very important. You know, especially when it comes to your children, when they are angry, when they are sad, when they are depressed, when they are disappointed, you hear it in their voice. Be aware of your own voices. Learn what voice you use to be angry. Learn what voice you use to show worry. Because if everything's like this, I'm worried. I'm pissed. I'm really excited for you. They're not going to learn anything. They're not going to know what to do. Learn your different voices and control your voice. Whatever you want to express and control with your voice. We have to be aware of that. And the other thing is that we have to be emotionally in control. We have to be, because we're the adult. We are the adult. You can be angry, but try not to be aggressive. Because the one thing that my mom did is said, I'm very angry with you. But she didn't pound her fist, she didn't spank me, she didn't do, she didn't do any of that. She just said, I am very angry with you. Okay? There was one time when we were going shopping and she said, get out of my car. And I'm like, you're angry. All right. So, and this is something that you can do, because this is allowed. Take a breath, leave the room, do whatever you need to do in order to control your emotions before you speak. If your son or daughter has said something to you that has truly made you angry, remove yourself for a little bit. Just say like, hey listen, I'm going to go get a glass of water, and I'll be right back. And give yourself some time to process what just happened. Alright, this is the last thing that I want to share with you from the book. Parents must allow their child to develop his own person, with his own personality, even if that personality is different from either of the parents, and even if the personality is different than which the parents wish their child to have. Your child is not going to be you, and your child is probably not going to be the golden child that you have in your mind. They might. But you're laughing because they're not. So, they need to be able to develop, to have their own person, to know that they are separate from you and from everyone else. That's independence. And it's a positive thing. It's a very positive thing. We need to make sure that, we're going to have expectations. And you know what? Sometimes they're not going to make it. But that's okay, because you know what? Just like Rick and Barb said, we've got to love them. We've got to love them and say, hey, that's cool. Let's get back on track.